again, and we're talking about some of the European nations and their connections to the lost tribes. We talked about Zebulun and the Dutch, the Holland,
the British,
and the British and Americans, Manasseh and Ephraim.
And then we can talk about the French being Reuben.
Okay. Now, we've all seen the character of Reuben when we read the scripture. We know that Reuben went up to his father's couch, had sexual relations with one of the concubines of his father. So he was pretty sternly rebuked for his proclivities towards that side of things. But at the same time, with Reuben, he is the firstborn, right? So in it, and his name means "behold a son." And in other words, there's a sense of grandeur, and it's mentioned that in the scriptures, the excellency of dignity, and the sense of what is the right thing to do. There's a sense of him being the eldest and
good quality.
Yes. For example, we wouldn't eat with a knife and fork if it wasn't for the French. They set the standards in the French court. There's a sense of grandeur also in some of their histories. The boy stood on the burning. Do you remember that book, that poem, "The Boy Stood on the Burning Deck"? Maybe by the time you and I went to school, it had already. But during the whole of the 19th century, "The Boy Stood on the Burning Deck" was a classic, and that was about a French boy who in a sense of duty and grandeur and gallantry, he stood on that deck, and the whole ship was on fire, and he just stood at his post because that was where he was supposed to be until the ship blew up. And that was a sense of the French with that character of grandeur, of gallantry, and that element is in the French. That's the spiritual connection that I made, and as far as I'm concerned, it's very strong. Is there something else that you can bring from the point of view of linguistics, or a knowledge of the archaeology, or?
Well, I could say that the French name France comes from the Franks.
Yes.
And the primary element amongst the Franks, amongst at least those Franks who founded the Kingdom of France, are known as Ribuari. Ribuari Franks.
Okay.
And this has been interpreted to mean the Franks from the river banks. It's similar, related to the Latin. The Latin says Ribuari. Ribuari, meaning riverbank. So they say take Ribuari as a version of Ripuari. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, because often the names given to peoples in ancient times were interpreted according to some characteristics that they had in the eyes of the people doing the interpretation.
Yes.
In other words, the Romans, also the Hebrews, but the Romans, Hebrews, all ancient peoples, when they heard the name given to these peoples, they would have interpreted according to what the nearest meaning it had in their own language, in their own language of Latin. Whereas their name in their own language of these Franks was apparently Ribuari. Ribuari can be considered similar, a version of an Aramaic version of Reuben.
Yes. So there's a connection there.
And then numerous connections, also connections with the sons of Reuben.
Okay, so they have names as well, and presumably those names got carried on.
Yes.
Yes.
And we have what is interesting, just as you mentioned, the mentioning characteristics and names together. So we have an interesting point here, which is worth looking, which I explained in detail in my book, The Tribes. Here's a map of France, and here is national characteristics of Reuben. It says that the son of Reuben, firstborn of Israel, was Hanok and Phalu and Hezron and Carmi. So Reuben had 4 sons. Okay? And the name of the firstborn was Hanok. Hanok in Hebrew means consecrate. Means consecrate. It means initiate, inaugurate. It also means educate. So it suggests kind of courtly behaviour and standards of education.
Yes.
So we have the French Sorbonne, we have the French academics, French intellect, which is very high, very logical, very both stratified and demanding. And that was the one. The other son, the next son, is called Falul. Falul in Hebrew means excellent.
Okay, there's another connection. Excellency of dignity. Related to Reuben, the firstborn.
French cooking, French perfume.
Yes,
French wines.
Fashions, for example.
French put emphasis on having the best on something which is distinguished.
And then,
Fellow means distinguished.
Or panache is another word. Some of these words and descriptions jumped out of the French language and they come into our language, and then we talk about panache or grandeur or.
And next to words you really like them. The next name is Hetzron, which in Hebrew can mean both courtyard, French courtiers, and peasants. So the French are known for their very strong the peasant element. The people of small homesteads, of agricultural values. That is a very strong element of land, or owning land, and dwelling together in small communities. That is an aspect of the French. The last one, Kami, which means vineyard.
Oh yeah.
Kami is in Hebrew means Kairam. In Hebrew it means vineyard. So the last son of Reuben is called vineyard. The French are known. You think of the French, and one of the things which comes to mind is French wines.
Yes.
And that is the name given to the fourth
Isn't
son
that
of Reuben.
something? Isn't that something?
And incidentally, these names are also names of different tribes, or similar to names of different tribes, which were prominent in French history in the early Frenchmen of France, under the Celts and the Franks who came after them.
I see. Now, I've only got a little bit more time here. Yet on this tape, I can switch it over. Yeah, but the Celts. Could you mention something about the Celts? The Celtic music is starting to become popular, and yet I don't have a real firm grasp on the Celts. I know that they tended to move westwards too. They were Central European, I guess. And then they tended to go into the British Isles. Any connections there?